Stud Sensors. Good morning. I'm going to do a side series called My Favorite Tool and How to Use It. Episode 1. It's my goal not to highlight the tools everyone else on YouTube is showing. I want to show you a cost-effective way to do something. As is often the case, you can buy a fancy tool to do something, or you can use a simple, inexpensive tool and get the same result. Hope you enjoyed the video my dad put up of what stud sensors not to buy, but I'm telling you, this is the stud sensor you need. This is the 20-cent stud sensor that I grew up with, a very small drill bit, and I'll show you how to use that too. If you're only trying to locate a single stud, this is the way to go. If you're like me, you might want to invest 50 or 60 bucks in one of these. Don't worry, today's paperwork will be short. Just want to illustrate the basic concept of finding a stud for people that have never done it before. So let's pretend we're looking down at a wall from the top. So what are you going to have? You're going to see the wall surface. A modern American home, it's a ½ inch thick. The ceiling is 5/8. Then you're going to have studs. Again, in North America, stud will be 1.5 inches wide, and the wall will be nominally one of these two thicknesses, depending on if it's a wall or a ceiling. So what are you trying to ultimately do? Trying to get your nail or screw or whatever you're trying to get into a stud. So you're hanging something heavy. What you're trying to get is your screw or nail or whatever into the middle of the stud. Here's my fictitious screw. Often what happens is people hit the very edge or they miss. How do we locate a stud? Whether you're using either method I'll show you here, either just a simple small drill bit or a stud sensor, you're trying to find the middle. Nothing will tell you where the middle is. What you have to find is the edges. Here, edge 1, here, edge 2. Whatever this distance is, you put your drill and then screw or nail or whatever you're doing between those two marks. That puts you in the middle. Now I'm going to illustrate what happens when you run across a double or triple stud or a 4x4 or something else you do, so don't worry about that. I'll also cover what happens when you go all the way across the wall and don't find a single stud. I'll explain what's really going on. That's the end of paperwork for today. Stud sensor. So I'm going to let you cheat today and see what it looks like behind the drywall, so you understand when you see the measurement technique appear to fail, but actually it does not. Here's just a mock-up of a stud wall, 2 single studs, and then one in the middle. Normally these are faced 16 on center in North America, but often they are not because the last stud may be short 16 inches, so it's a space less than 16. So don't count on things being spaced 16 on center. The other thing I would point out here too is here's a single, here's a double, and here's a triple. And I did that so you can see what might appear confusing when you don't know what's behind the drywall, but in actuality it does make sense. Let's spin this thing around and I'll show you the drill technique first. So I've mocked up some drywall and some studs. I've already drawn the outline of where the wood is behind the wall to help you see what we're up to here. So method 1, knocking. A lot of time people can hear when you're knocking. To be honest, I've never been that successful with it. Professionals are very good at it. The way I learned as a kid was I used the drill method. I have a 1/16 inch drill bit, the smallest drill bit in a standard set. Like here's the dad only set from when I was a kid that I wasn't allowed to ruin. If you look at just a drill set, you'll see it is the smallest drill bit in a typical set. So if you have a smaller one, great, use it. You can easily spackle over the holes and it's like it never happened. And usually where you're drilling holes, you're going to be putting something in front of it, like a picture or something. That's why you're drilling the hole in the first place. You can just patch the holes next time you paint the room, just cover them over. So the way this works is if you know how wide your 2x4 is, 1.5 inches in North America, if we drill a hole spaced a little less than 1.5 inches, we should be able to find a stud no matter which way we go. You have to understand that most walls, the studs go up and down. If you start drilling up and down too, you'll never hit anything potentially. So you have to drill knowing where you're going to hit probably a stud. When you drill, if it goes through and then boom, bottoms out real fast, that means that there's air behind where you're drilling. If it keeps sinking heavily, you can feel resistance all the way to the bottom of the bit, then you know you've hit wood. So I'll just demonstrate. Not a stud. 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 Stud. So now we found a piece of wood, but we don't know where we are. Now I drew the outline so you can see what's really going on. So now what I do is I start cutting the distance between the holes in half and work my way backwards. So I'll go right between those two holes. Stud. Now I'll split the holes again, right in between. Not a stud. I'll split the distance again. Stud. So I'm gonna call that edge 1. Now I'm gonna go that way and see if I can find the other edge. Not a stud. I'll go in between now. Stud. So now I'll go between that and that.
I hear you.
So I got wood here, I got wood there, and I missed there. So for all intents and purposes, that's edge 2. These lines aren't exact. In fact, I intentionally shifted the wood so you can see how this works. But this just gives you an idea of what to expect. So here's my 2 edges. So when I want to sink a hanger, you always want to sink it right in the middle. This is edge 1 here. This is edge 2 there. That's where I would put my anchor. This is the drill method. It might seem like you're putting a million holes in the wall, and you kind of are. Filling these holes is pretty easy. You just sand it a little bit, put a little spackling in there, and then next time you sand it flat, it'll look like it never happened. Using a little drill bit makes it pretty easy. Usually you can guess pretty close by knocking, and usually find wood on the first try knocking, and then just use the drill bits to fine tune and find your exact center. Drill method. Free. Let's move on to the ProSensor 710. So this stud sensor is the best stud sensor I've ever seen. It is so reliable, it's uncanny. It has 13 lights across this thing and a little bit of a rubber grab here, and there's a little button right here that you push to turn it on. Other stud sensors I've used in the past required you to find a void, hold it up, turn it on, and let it calibrate to that being a void, and then you would slide it. The problem is if you start it on a stud, it gets confusing. And I've had this for about 5 or 6 years now. I am not endorsed by this company in any way. It is an amazing product, and it's very affordable. I believe they're $50 or $55. The only difference between the 710 and the 710 Plus, I believe, is just the bubble level, which I decided I never really used. The way I use this one, instead of having to find the 2 edges, we don't need to do that. If you watch here, you'll see the lights. Now, the real edge is somewhere between this turned out light and that turned on light, and vice versa there. And as you slide it, you'll see it move. So what I do is, the way I use this is I just mark the center coming from both directions with my eyeball. So I'll show you. So I'm going to call that about the center coming that way, and I just watch the lights and it seems to be about centered. And I just come in on this side to double check. I would probably call it about there. I'm not exactly, but I'm in the meat of the wood here. I'm in the middle. It doesn't have to be exactly in the middle. It just needs to be in the wood, not on the edge. With a stud sensor like this, especially if you have a remodeled home or an older home, you might find some unusual framing, and you might slide down a wall and never get a hit. The reason is because you're sliding down a void. Or you might go this way, and slide across here, and you'll see something like this. Lots of lights on. You can go this way with it too. That's what's nice about this particular sensor, is you can slide in any direction you want. You can even do it at an angle, whatever you're trying to get an understanding of. But you'll see here, and again, you saw behind here that I have a couple extra blocks of wood. What you're actually seeing is doubled and tripled up wood here, which is common around like windows, doorways, things like that. Has to do with load bearing. So the thing to remember is that if you find an area here where it's double or triple or more than just a single stud, you don't want to just go in necessarily in the middle. Just keep in mind that there's these studs like this. If you went in the middle of 3, that would put you in the middle of a stud. Okay. What if you went in the middle of 2? You're putting a screw into a space between 2 pieces of wood. Now, the wood I used was real straight, so it's, pretty tight, but houses get rained on when they're built, and you might have a slightly warped piece of wood, and what might happen is the screw might bite, and feel like it's strong, and then you hang a heavy weight on it, and over time, all of a sudden one day it just falls out. You don't want to do that. So you want to make sure you're always sinking it into the wood. So in a case like this, put it in the middle here or put it in the middle here. Here, here, or here. And you'll see that the lights aren't perfectly accurate, they're close. That's why sliding it around and watching the lights, you use your eye to decipher what the lights are telling you. Use this for a little bit and you'll see how easy it is to use. You get the idea. I've had this for 5 or 6 years. I've dropped it a lot. I think I've only put new batteries in it twice, and I use it a lot. It does have a bit of a give here too. Fabulous product, not sponsored. 2 thumbs up from Aaron. And then if you see here, this thing just pops open and it just has 2 little AA batteries in it. So that's all there is to it. Very simple device. Anyways, I hope this helps you a little bit on finding studs. I will say that with Christmas coming, this stud sensor would be an ideal present. $50 range, it's affordable. If you take care of it like I have, you will get a long life out of it. All you need is a pencil, knuckle, or a very small drill bit, or if you want to go and spend a little bit more, a ProSensor. This is a ProSensor 710. I believe they still make this model today. This one, I believe, was the Plus. It literally just gave you a level, which I've never used. I hope you found this useful. Happy hanging heavy things. Let's wrap. Normally, stud sensors just come straight to me, but you know, that's baloney.